Perfect. So the topic of today is the fundamental of international SEO. So what we will discuss today, like what is it, why is it important, do you actually need it, and what are then the elements what we can optimize within international SEO, and then some best practices that will be as part of the presentation as well, and what kind of tools we can use. So just very shortly, like Joanna already introduced me, but just some clients where I worked for, and then 12 years experience within SEO. So first of all, about international SEO, like what is it? It's actually like when you have normal SEO, you try to increase the traffic to your website. International SEO is if you do that for multiple countries or multiple languages. So that gives an extra complexity for what you need to keep in mind. So that's why this, like all the activities, what you do then for multiple countries and multiple languages, that falls on the international SEO. It actually, like, it has a couple of layers, what it includes. First of all, it needs to be defined, like what are the countries you want to go after. Then for each of those country or languages, pages need to be created. And then we need to make sure that we have the correct technical settings to make sure that search engines as Google, that they know which page do they need to rank in which country. So if we, for example, create Arabic pages for Saudi Arabia and also for the UAE, then we need to have certain tags in place. So Google understands that these pages for Saudi Arabia should rank there. Then the main purpose what we do with international SEO is that although we usually work on a global or regional level, we actually try to obtain that if somebody is visiting from that country, and that they have the feeling that it's a local, like a local website, because everything like the text, the currency, like it feels just a website coming from their country instead of that it's a global brand. So therefore, like we act like we think globally, but we act very locally because we want to make sure that that person feels very trustworthy, like comfortable on the website. And if that person has a higher trust in the website, it also usually means a higher conversion rate. So that also leads to more sales. Then there are a couple of things why international SEO is important. First of all, if you expand it, like your attention to multiple countries, it also means you're targeting higher search volume, because now you don't have only the search volume of your country, but also maybe 4 or 5 other countries. So it also means like you have the potential to generate a lot higher traffic. And if you get higher traffic, that also usually means increased revenue. Then if you have a larger client base, it means that you create economies of scales, because if you produce like 100 products versus like 10,000, you usually get a discount if you do like a larger quantity. And the same you also have for marketing. If you create like banners or those things, it's less work if you like duplicate them for each country just with local adaptations than having for each country develop them separately. And then if you have your website, if they're very locally optimized, so if a person has like a high trust in it and feels very natural, then it also leads to higher conversion rate and higher revenue as a consequence. So that's why it's very important. But first of all, is there a need? Like, do you really need internet SEO? And it depends very much on your goals. So is it that you want to focus on one country, or do you also want to expand to other countries? And which kind of countries do you then have in mind, and why? Like, these kind of questions help a lot for the international SEO roadmap and what you need to do. Then it's important to define like who are you actually targeting. You can already see from your, if you have, for example, Google Analytics installed, you can already see if your website has visitors from other countries. So in this example, with a screenshot from Google Analytics, you can see that the most visitors are from the US, but then also this website gets visitors from Brazil, India, Germany. So if those are relevant markets, then we could then decide like to translate it to Portuguese or to German, or make a localized version for India. So basically copy the website in English, but then change it so people from India actually feel that it's a website from their country. So this can already give a first input, like which kind of markets would be interesting to expand to, because I already got visitors to my website. Another thing is that are you operating in a country with multiple languages? So for example, the UE with Arabic and English. For those kind of cases, it would also be interesting to focus on international SEO and making sure that both languages are performing well. And then also, so if you have your goals and you have the target audience where you want to go after, it's good to ask the question like, can I actually deliver to international customers? Meaning that if you create a product in your country, but the shipping costs are very high, and that makes the product not competitive in the country where you want to expand to, maybe that's not the best country to go after. The same is for if you can deliver the same customer experience. So if you want to expand to, let's say, Japan, but you have nobody on your customer service team that actually speaks Japanese, this means that you also are not able to provide the same customer experience as you do, for example, for English-speaking clients. So that's also good to keep in mind. Like, are you able to deliver on a competitive price and added value? And can you provide the same customer experience? And then there are different things in international SEO what we can optimize. A very, very important thing is to make sure that the website is in the local language. It sounds very logical, but there are like still a lot of like global companies who just have their website in English. What happens then is that if a customer is searching in their own language and we only provide an English website, it means that for Google, this website is not relevant because it's not answering the query of the user in their language. So therefore, having the website in a local language is a large requirement. Another thing is appropriate use of images. Some things are more acceptable in some countries versus others. Could be, certain habits or things. So it's always good to make sure, like, or verify, like, is this fine to use this image, or do we need to make sure or make some adaptations? But also, can people recognize themselves in the images? So if you're targeting China, but you're using just images with Western people, that may not be seen as very relevant, or they cannot identify with them. So therefore, it's good to adjust the images to the markets you're targeting. One thing as well is with capitalization. So especially in US English, if you look to any meta titles or headings, they usually write every word with a capital. This is something which is in other languages, for example, Dutch, I'm from Holland, where it sounds very aggressive. So that's also good to double check, like what is the writing style for each country. Also use local currency. So if you're in the UAE, you expect to have a website in dirham and not in dollars. So that's good to, very important as well. And to provide local contact info. Local contact info gives more trust because they have the feeling that there's somebody in their country they can reach out to. So that also leads to a higher conversion rate. And another thing to be aware of are local regulations. So in Europe, you have the GDPR, which means like a law for privacy, which is quite strict, but you don't have that in the US. So depending on which countries you want to reach out to, it's good to check, are there certain rules, regulations for website, what they need to have to make sure that you're staying within the local regulations. Then with the use of images, this is an example of Coca-Cola, where this one is for Colombia. And you see that even in the image, this is in the Spanish language. So this makes it very like localized because the image is in Spanish itself, besides the banner text. And then this one is for Germany, and they have on the bottle, like this is in the German language, like without sugar. So this also gives the whole feeling that the website is like fully in German, so from their country. You don't necessarily see with all brands that they have localized images, because sometimes what they do is that they only show products. So Nike, for example, only have like they show like their shoes. So that could be a choice. On the other hand, if you show people, that's usually a bit more personalized, but that's like things what you can test out yourself as well. And then also an important one with currency. It's a bit small, but you will see that this website from Under Armour, it says directly in Canadian dollars, whereas same website, but then in the UK, it says the pound here. So this makes it also very clear to users, like, okay, this is a website meant for my country. Then related to the content, so one major thing is that the website needs to be in the local language, but it's also good to check which keywords are having the highest search volume. Even if they have the same language, for example, US and UK, there are differences between spelling, but also differences between words. So trainers versus sneakers, both sports shoes. But if you look into the US, there's a higher search volume, way higher for sneakers. Whereas if you look in the UK, people there use trainers. So if you optimize the website and you copy your, let's say that you have your base version in US English and you copy it to UK, it's important to update these wordings, these keywords, to make sure that you're actually targeting higher traffic in those countries. Another thing is that also, of course, the URL structure needs to be localized. So it needs to be in the local language as well. It needs to be descriptive and also to contain popular keywords. Just one context there, never try to over-optimize. Just make sure that it sounds natural. Because Google also has some metrics in place, is that when you try to over-optimize your pages, that it actually lowers your ranking. So one thing what I already mentioned is that there's a difference between UK and US. So it's quite some examples, but also in terms of words, there are quite some differences. So that's why it's always good to do keyword research and see which keywords are higher in each market that you want to target. And if you translate your website to other languages, you have to keep in mind that some languages are longer. So it means exactly the same. So here, free shipping and fast delivery. This is in the Dutch, which is already longer. But then in German, it's even like almost 30% longer. And you'll see here in the example of Amazon that then the text doesn't become visible anymore. So here what would have been better if they used the abbreviation, so just like UE, but then in German, instead of the full wording. So that's something to keep in mind with the translations. So usually what I do is that when I optimize for multiple markets, first I do the keyword research in English. And then I check like what are the global search volume. I do this with the AdWords Keyword Planner. There are other tools as well. Just I prefer to stay as close as possible to the source. So that's why I'm mainly in AdWords Keyword Planner. So I then get the search volume for all markets. And then I specify it also per market. And it actually gives some very interesting insights, because if we look for flight tickets, so here we, for example, have flight ticket, which has like, it's the first one with the highest search volume. Then there's airline tickets and plane tickets. So globally, flight tickets have the highest search volume. But then if you look to the US, people are actually not searching that way. like it's a lower amount, people are searching more on airline tickets and plane tickets. So this also shows like even though the global search volume is higher, in a large market at the US, it might be different volume. Whereas then if we go to the UK, you see that a flight ticket is way higher and airline ticket and plane ticket. That's why it's very important if you do a global keyword research to split it out per market what you're trying to target, because there are differences per market. So then you can also adjust your text to it. Then if we create content, usually we do that, or the start point from a global level. It could be either global or regional, depending on what the company is serving. But from like Philips and Randstad and McAfee, we had like a global content calendar. So then based on keyword research, we then identify like what are topics which are popular across all markets. And then we add them to the content calendar and create content for those. It's very important when you create a content calendar to also share it with the markets so they know what's coming, because otherwise what can happen is that they have their own team and they start in content maybe about the same topics. And then when as a global team, when you share this content, then they say, okay, we already created this. So it's actually a loss of time and resources. So as soon as you have a global content calendar shared with the local markets, so they also know what's coming up. Then it could be that certain topics are locally very relevant, but not necessarily on a global scale. Could be a certain holidays, certain like national events. One example of Middle East, where Ramadan is very large, with recipes and a lot of like marketing campaigns. But maybe that's not very large on like a global scale. So in that case, if certain countries, if they create content, it's very important as a global team, if you see that they are creating content to share it with the other countries in that region, so they are leveraging and benefiting from each other. There's quite some differences between countries, values, perceptions, and what they find important. So a very nice app is Hofstede Insights, and you can fill in any country and compare it to another country. So this can be very useful for creating content, as well as when you're in contact with local markets. So if you're a global company and where, for example, in the US, it's very common to have like employee of the month because it's a very individualistic country. So people are like perfectly fine on their own. Whereas when you're in markets as Japan, it's much more like we do everything in a group. So if you put there one person and you place that person, like say employee of the month, that person will feel very uncomfortable because they are now being placed above the group, whereas they have the feeling they did it together. So that's why certain things as employee of the month doesn't work in those like more collectivistic like group countries. So it's good to be in mind. So when you use this app, like here, for example, France versus Bulgaria, there's a difference on individualism, and you can then see like what are the recommendations to keep in mind. So this is a very nice one to try out. And the presentation will be shared as well with you. So this is the link to the app. Then with International SEO, it's good to keep in mind that there are multiple search engines. Although Google has the largest market share at 92%, it does depend which countries you target. So especially China, where Baidu is very large, and some other countries, for example, Korea, they have Naver. So it's good to check based on the country where you want to target, which search engine is there. And you can do that with StatCounter. Again, you can click on the link and then it will take you there. But for example, in the UAE, it's almost 97% is Google. So that's, and actually, when we talk about SEO, we usually talk about Google because Google is also the most strict one. But if you focus on some countries, as Russia, they have Yandex, or China with Baidu, it's good to keep in mind that there are differences. And I don't go too much in detail here, but it's just to show that there are differences between each search engine, different webmaster tools, different guidelines about sitemaps. So this is very important to make sure to double check which search engines are in the market you want to target. Then if you besides SEO, there's also App Store optimization, which is also, it's quite similar as SEO, just a bit easier because there are less metrics. But if you do App Store optimization with the same tool, you can also see what kind of mobile devices they are using. So here, for example, for Pakistan, where actually 94% of the users have an Android device. So if you're developing an app, then it's very important, and you know that you first or mainly need to focus on Android versus iOS with Apple. Then there are different ways how to set up a multilingual or like your sites for international SEO. There are two best practices. One is if you have a local country TLD, so if you have the extension of the country, and the other one is .com, and then a country or language folder. There are other options as well as a subdomain, which are not recommended because they're seen by Google as a separate website. So only these two I would recommend. They have different benefits because here, like the extension of the country, this shows to Google that this website is specifically meant for that country. So that's a ranking factor. The other one, here, .com and then / country folder or language folder. What the benefit is here is that you're combining all the pages across the market under one website. This means that you're also combining all the authority and all the SEO value under one website, which made that website a very strong website. So that's why, and it's a different ranking factor, but that's why this option is also an interesting one. So it could be that in one country that there are multiple languages. The best way in those cases is to have a language and the country in the same folder. So then you keep your folder short and you keep it nice and clean. Then there's one thing which is very important is the technical implementation. So if you have, especially for pages in the same language, if you have a Arabic page for Saudi Arabia, for UAE, Kuwait, Oman, then Google needs to know which pages needs to rank in which country. So these are the tags that can help, that helps Google define which page should rank in each country. So you can then say, like, this is the English page for United Arab Emirates, and then you can say that this is the URL of that page, and this is then Arabic UE. So these kind of tags then help to define to Google. Then it knows, like, okay, for this language in this market, I need to rank these pages. Important one to note here is that href language tags only work when they are referring to each other. So in this case, there are multiple websites like the .com, .ae, .sa from Saudi. So these tags need to be implemented on each of those websites because otherwise it doesn't work. So it needs to, they need to point to each other because then it's seen by Google as a confirmation that these tags are correct. Then if you have them implemented and you want to make sure, like, is everything going well or is there an issue, you can use a keyword like a SEO tool, and then this is an example of Conductor, but you also can check it out with other tools. You can then search on your brand name. I used your example, but this is Philips. So then if you would search for Philips in the UAE, I actually saw there also websites coming up for USA, Singapore, UK, and other countries. So although the largest number of keywords were in the UAE, so for the most keywords that we were ranking, the correct page was coming up. But still, for 51 keywords, the US page came up. And in even lighter, a lower number, also the Singapore ones. So then if this happens, then it's good to check for which keywords is this appearing. And that helps you to identify, is there an issue with the href language tag? Or it can be that the page in the US is providing more in-depth and a better answer to the user query. So sometimes when this happens, it's not an issue of the href language tag, so a technical issue, but it could be a content. One example what we had with Philips is that we had a recipe page in the UAE, and we saw that the keywords were chicken recipes, and we didn't have a page for it on the UAE website. So in that case, the US website with chicken recipes came up. So in those cases, when that happens, it's best to copy in this case, the chicken recipe page to the UAE. So to making sure that you are answering that user query on the website that is meant for that region. Sometimes what happens is that global websites are using an IP redirect. So it's checking where is the user based, and then it's sending the user to that version of their country. This can actually harm the ranking sometimes because Google is mainly visiting the website from the US. So if you have IP redirection in place, it could be that Google only sees the US version and not all your other versions. So there's a way around it, but the safe way would be actually that you allow users and search engines to visit any of your websites in other countries. But if you see that the website that the user is coming from another country, that then they get like a banner, like if they want to stay on that website or do they want to move to the website specifically for their country. So here the example of underarm is a bit more prominent. And this is a more subtle one of Philips, but it's two examples of how to give a message to the user if they want to visit the website in their own country. One thing related to loading time. So what happens that if you're operating globally, it's good to make use of a content delivery network. What that means is that you're making use of a network with different servers around the globe. So if somebody is from the US is loading the website, then the website will be physically loaded from a server in the US. But if somebody from Oman is loading the website, then it will be somewhere around Oman or server in Oman itself. So by having a content delivery network, and they then check where is this user located, and then loading the website from the closest server to the location of the user. So this speeds up the loading time a lot. The only thing where this is not suitable or is for China, because China has quite some restrictions on their traffic and how what is allowed there. So for those or specifically for China, it's best to use a server in China instead of a server near Hong Kong, because even in Hong Kong it could impose a delay of like 20 seconds to make sure that it goes through all the checks and to be visible in China. And then in Western countries we're used to very fast internet, but especially in the it is UAE is fine, but some other countries it can be very, very slow. For example, Egypt sometimes. So it's good to keep in mind with when you develop websites or you request like what kind of features I want to have on your website. Especially if a lot of like moving things that is being built with JavaScript, and that is slowing down the website. So especially if the internet is not that fast, it's good to not use too much like heavy code, so the user has to wait a lot. So especially for slow countries, make sure that the website is very fast and light, so they don't experience a negative or that they have to wait long before the page is being loaded. And one thing what can be important or useful as well is that if somebody is on your website, you can actually already load some of the content while he's still on the upper part. So in countries as Iraq, it can happen that the internet is not like falls out. So if you're loading content in the background, then they don't notice. They can still read further because it's already preloaded. So these are things to keep in mind with the web development. And that was it. Do you have any questions? I heard some sounds during the call.
Yeah. Guys, if you have any questions, you can drop it in the chat. Or if you want to unmute and ask any questions, that's fine as well. Maybe I can start with the first one. So Miranda, I'm just asking for everyone on the call. What does the day-to-day look like for an SEO specialist or an SEO manager? Just moving away from specifically international SEO. Well, what are some of the things that you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's a pattern of where first I look into which are the keywords that I want to target. Then I add them to my tracking tool to see how am I currently performing. Then, especially for the keywords which are ranking on the second or the third page, those are usually the high or the easy ones to get to the first page, because Google already knows which page should rank, and we're already ranking for it on the second or the third page. So then I make an order of those keywords in order of like high search volume to low and how important they are. And then I start with optimizing or see how can I optimize or expand these pages. A trend what we see a lot is that Google goes much more into in-depth content. So what we usually use as a guideline is to create pages with minimal 2,000 words, as long as it stays interesting and relevant, and then make it very easy for scanning users, because nobody will really go and read all those 2,000 words. But if we have good headings and we make it easy, like quick links to go to the part of interest, we make it very easy for if somebody comes to the page, they see okay, this page is talking about this topic where I'm interested in, and they can click on it and go directly to that part. So I do the keyword research, monitor how we're ranking, and then optimize the pages in order of priority. And then when I'm done with the pages of the second and the third page, which are already ranking, then I look into other topics, like which topics are really relevant, do have an interesting search volume, but are we not ranking? So then I also make a priority list on order of high search volume and relevancy, and then I start to create content for those as well. So it's mainly where are my opportunities, what can I optimize, and then actually start creating and expanding the content.
Right, sounds great. There are also two questions in the chat. So Marine asks, what are the best software and tools to use specifically for SEO?
Yeah, depends on your budget, but there are a couple. No, like the conductor one, which I showed, is an enterprise tool, and it's a very useful, but it's very expensive. So it's usually typically for enterprise clients. But so especially like Screaming Frog, it's a very interesting one. It's a web scraper. So you can see like any errors which you have on your site, any pages which, for example, have no meta title, meta description. You can see the amount of words per page. So that's also an indication on which kind of pages are very thin, and so which can they optimize. And that tool is for free for the first 500 URLs. And then after it's like £99 per year. So it's a very affordable tool, but it's used by almost every SEO expert. So it's a very handy one. Then also a tracking tool is very needed. I use myself Moz a lot and Conductor. So those are usually my favorite tools. And then you can use a tool as well for link building, which I used Majestic, but Ahrefs is also an important one. But usually I prefer first to focus on content because that already gives the largest opportunity. But a lot of the website where I work with, it's either they don't have content on their page around that topic, what they want to focus on, or it's too thin. So to start there with content, that usually already drives a lot of growth. And then by having good content, very interesting, you actually start generating also automatically some backlinks. Sometimes it needs some help, but by focusing on good quality content, that usually already has a very good impact.
Right, sounds great. So, Marine, I hope that answers your question. Bushra asks, what's better to target? Is it better to target a language or a country when you're optimizing?
Yeah, good question. It depends a bit on goals and how different your offer is per country. So what we did with Philips is that we have a different website for each of the countries in the Middle East. And we also had different products, different currencies. So for those countries, because the countries are very different, or like we have a different offer for each country, for those it's better to target per country. If you, for any like English or for the Spanish, you offer your website in Spanish, but you don't necessarily have a different offer for, if you would say you target Latin America, but the offer is the same for any of the countries, Chile, Peru, Argentina. It's fine to target per language as well. I would prefer country because then you have more opportunities to make the website really local. Then you can adapt the currency, the local contact details. So it provides more, you can provide more deeper optimizations. But of course, it's extra work as well. So it depends on the goals and the size of the website as well.
Right. So I have one more. Just for everyone on the call, most of us are quite new to all the things around SEO. What are some best practices that you would recommend for someone who is thinking about starting a career in SEO? Someone who's just starting out, what should they do to kind of get stuck in? Are there courses, or should they try to get some work experience? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, so it's a very good field to be in because every company needs SEO. So there's a very high demand for SEO specialists, and it goes across borders. So yeah, every country, every company needs it. So it's also very nice to do like international projects. To get started, first of all, I would create an own website, maybe an own blog or something like an information website, or maybe even offer a product, because having your own website and also like building it yourself, that will like learn a lot of things that could be very helpful in your SEO career. At the same time, I would also recommend to follow courses, even on like Udemy or like other websites. They have very affordable but a large scale of SEO courses. So in the time where we started, there was hardly anything. So we had to test. We were like building websites ourselves, doing a lot of tests. But the luxury now these days is that there are a lot of courses, so you're able to get better in a way faster time because there's so much information out there. And there's one SEO specialist. She created a website which is called Learning SEO IO.io, which is a lot of information about the different aspects, like technical content, data analysis. So that also would be a good research to look into. But mainly having an own website and test it out on your own. Yes, exactly, Jonah. She wrote it in the chat. Yeah, having an own website that will make life a lot easier. Also in talks with like a lot of SEO or a lot of the SEO work is in collaboration with other departments, the technical department, the content department. So having your own website and working on the different elements in your website makes your conversations with other departments also a lot easier because you also understand what kind of work they are doing.
Awesome. So I hope that kind of gives you guys a little bit of like a guide to just get started if anyone is interested. We also do have an SEO course with Qureos, and you can join the next cohort or register your interest if you'd like to go through that. I'll give you one more minute. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead, put them in the chat. We will share the recording with you shortly after. And if you want to go through anything once more or want to look at the deck, you can go ahead and do that. Miranda, do you maybe want to share your contact details if anyone wants to get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. Shall I share it in the chat or in
yeah,
the
you can maybe share your screen and they can just take a...
Oh, yeah. Will do.
We've still got a minute if anyone has any more questions.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so you can reach out to her if you specifically want to ask her anything or have any questions. We will be having more webinars and cohorts coming up soon. But from the Qureos team, I just want to thank Miranda for being here, for taking us through these new topics and making it seem super simple, even though it is probably very complicated. Sorry, Saif, you had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, if you learn this digital marketing now, let's say, right, and what do we do for hands-on experience, right? So if we see in the market, they are recruiting people at the entry level, either as an intern or like or an experienced person in this marketing, right? So just want to understand how will we get a hands-on experience by just doing this training? Will we be able to attend the job interviews or kind of get selected in some good companies? So that's one. And then the next is, what is the next phase of this, right? There is the social media and there's marketing towards it, and what is the next evolution of it, right? If there are few social media and then we are marketing over there, I mean, or we are doing SEO over there, but what is the next evolution on this?
Yeah. So for your first question, it's a very point because if you have an interview, they definitely will ask, what is the other work that you have done in the past? That's why I highly recommend to set up a website yourself. So also when you go to an interview, you can also show, this is my website. These are the results that I achieve with this website. So it also shows that based on your own website, you got lessons learned, like what was working, what was not working. So it also improves your skills and also your hands-on experience. So having your own website, it's good to choose something which you like a hobby or something you're interested in. And then if you start with WordPress, that is like it's there are a lot of themes out there which you can use as a base. So you can create within a weekend, a week, you can have your own website and then build it up from there. That also gives the hands-on experience. As a starting role, it would usually be that is for a smaller company, because a larger enterprise companies, they usually ask for a couple of years experience, which is perfectly fine, because the benefit of working for a smaller company is that you're doing all phases of SEO, because usually you'll be the only SEO specialist. So you do from content, technical, outreach. So you get a good understanding of the complete like SEO field, and then you can choose like which part do I like the most. For example, content, technical, or outreach. Usually, I find the content and the technical one more interesting, but it's personal. But then you can like specialize in one of those functions. So first, I would go for an own website, something of which you find interesting. Then start or applying at a bit smaller companies, which usually ask for a lower amount of experience, and you have the benefit of doing all the aspects of SEO, and then like use that as a path to grow within the SEO career. You also ask about what is the evolution or what will come next. My thing is that, or how I see it, that it becomes even more important. Usually, if you look into like which are the digital channels that drive most revenue, search, it's a very large part of it. Depends on which field you're in, but for like at least for most of the companies I worked in, like the SEO and paid search, they're like 50% at least of the traffic. Sorry, of the revenue of the company. So it's a very important channel. And you have, for example, in Europe, you have like regulations that you're not able to email email persons which are not your customer, or which haven't requested like information on your website. So with email, you're a bit limited what you can do. You still have social channels and social advertising which you can do, but because of these regulations and because people uh, they don't necessarily want to be spent. If they have an interest, they will search in Google. So I think that definitely search will remain an important channel and will grow in the future as well. There are a lot of blogs though which are saying that SEO is dead, but I think, or my interpretation is like SEO is very or it's different than it used to be. Um, like in the old days, it was optimizing your meta titles, descriptions, your heading, making sure you had the right keywords, which is still like valid, but it's much more changed towards are you providing in-depth content? Is the content on your website, do you highlight a topic from multiple angles? So do you answer the user query? So it's much more about providing value and is the text natural? Is it interesting to read? Then really focusing on how many times was that keyword mentioned in your page. And a lot of the work with SEO is also used to be like a very field on its own. Now it's actually working a lot with other departments. So it's very working closely with developers, working closely with the public relations team, like any communication, what they sent out, how can we make it more SEO friendly? Working with the content team to make sure that the content, what they are producing, that people are searching for it. So it's much more like a person which is working with different members in the organization. So it become I like the elevation. It become more like diverse.
All right. I hope that answers your question, Said. Just to also, just to also add on to what Miranda was saying. So the cohort that we run through Qureos, especially for SEO, basically makes you work on a simulated project, and at the end of it, you will have something to that you can then share with future employers, and a certificate of achievement if you were to graduate from the course. So you might want to take a look at that on the website as well. So I guess that's it. We're going to wrap it up. Miranda, thank you once more for being here, for spending your hour with us. This has certainly been extremely helpful, and we've all learned something new. And hopefully we'll see you back here soon.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. So thanks, guys, for being here, for spending your evening with us. Hopefully we will meet on future webinars and cohorts very soon. Thank you, and I hope you have a good evening ahead, or morning, wherever you're joining us from.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.